So I've been seeing a lot of comments from Denver Broncos fans about last night's game against the New York Giants. And yes, it's a huge disappointment, but the Giants are still an NFL team. Just because they had lost some wide receivers to injury doesn't mean that the backups aren't any good. They're still an NFL team with NFL caliber players. So any team can win on any given Sunday. But I'm just, it's with all the problems in the world, you got to keep things in perspective. And it's not the end of the world that the Broncos lost, and I think fans need to keep in mind what the team gave them the last half a decade. Like for one thing, in 2011, that's when John Elway took over the team. They only went 8-8, but it was that, it was a year that people won't forget with Tim Tebow. They started out losing, and then he came in and they somehow put it together, and it was an exciting year. And in the first round of the playoffs, they beat the Steelers with Tebow throwing a big surprise throw to Demaryius Thomas. And then after that, the team signed Peyton Manning, one of the greatest to ever play the game. They went 13-3 his first year, and of course there was the disappointing loss to the Ravens. And Manning was voted the comeback player of the year. In 2013, they went 13-3 again. This time they went to the Super Bowl. They did lose the Super Bowl big time to Seahawks, but it still was a great season. Manning was the MVP. It was the most prolific offense in NFL history, with 4 wide receivers with over 10 or more touchdowns apiece. Manning threw for 5,477 yards and 55 touchdowns, both NFL records. So it was a really, really exciting year. 2014, they went 12-4, really good. Unfortunately, they lost to the Colts, but then the next year they go 12-4 again and went to the Super Bowl, and as you know, beat the Panthers, with Von Miller being the MVP of the Super Bowl. So those were 5 amazing years. How many NFL teams had 5 years like that in the last half decade? I can't think of any. Of course, last year they went 9-7, which is disappointing. But and if anyone says I'm not a fan because I'm saying this, would a non-fan do a watercolor of Elway, or an oil of Manning, or an oil of Tebow, or another watercolor of Daniel Graham? But just keep, I keep it in perspective. It's still a game. You have to ask yourself, if the Broncos had won last night, how would it have affected your life? Would you have gotten more vacation time at work? Would your boss have given you a raise? Would any illness you had have been cured? Would any of the hurricane victims in Texas, Florida, or Puerto Rico would any of their lives have changed for the better if the Broncos had won? Would the earthquake victims in Mexico, would their homes have been rebuilt? Would the fire victims in California and now Portugal, would their lives have been brought back, or would their houses have been rebuilt? I'm just trying to think of any benefit to anyone's life personally if the Broncos had won. In other words, there's more important things, so you got to keep this in perspective. If North Korea nukes us, that will affect all our lives, so that's important. Same with Iran. The economy affects us all, but you got to keep in mind this is just a sport. It's a fun one to watch, and it was a disappointing loss, but life will go on. So keep this in mind, what the Broncos did do. Don't forget all this. You can't win it all the time. There's peaks and valleys, and I would challenge anyone to name one sports team that's always on top forever. It doesn't happen. You have peaks and valleys. look at the Jets fans. They haven't won the Super Bowl since 1969 with Broadway Joe. That's almost a half a century. And in that time, the Broncos have been to 8 Super Bowls, winning 3 of them. So not too shabby. The Broncos have basically been to 1 out of every 7 Super Bowls that have ever been played. So all I'm saying is just keep it in perspective. There's more important things, and the result of the game last night, no matter which way it would have gone, would not have done anything to your life personally. So that's my thought.